Greetings, brothers and sisters. I almost said greetings, M&Fers. But not M&Fers, I was going to say. And so I saw this headline this morning, but I didn't get a chance to look at it, and I forgot about it. Then one of my friends on Facebook sent it to me. Ellen criticized for driving wife Portia de Rossi to ER after 3 weed drinks. So she's on the Jimmy Kimmel show, and I've talked about how they were both gatekeepers. They're both very prominent figures on humiliating other celebrities. Like, they humiliate celebrities that come on their shows. I've documented this in so many videos. And Ellen got burned because she stuck around. And Jimmy, when he was about to get canceled, he went on vacation for 3 months. But they're apparently friends. And in this segment, they're talking about pot and smoking it.
Are you high right now?
No.
No?
He's laughing like a little kid.
Hanukkah would be a good holiday
Hanukkah,
too.
yeah.
No,
No, I don't. I never did like marijuana or whatever. What's it called? A pot? Marijuana?
they call it that. Those are two of the names.
Yeah.
And so, he had Snoop Dogg on his show, and Snoop Dogg talked about how the only person to outsmoke him was Willie Nelson, and he said Seth Rogen talking about pot, and it's just out in the open that these celebrities are, drug addicts and alcoholics and all these other things, right? I mean, they are people who are self-medicating, plus they're on prescription medications. For example, Carrie Fisher had a giant Prozac bottle because she loved Prozac so much, and they said she wanted to be buried in it. They were going to put her ashes, because she got cremated, in her giant plastic Prozac pill. I mean, this is... think about that.
I am not a doobie brother. I am not.
What about gummies? Have you eaten one of those?
Everyone, because I hate pot. I really hate the way it feels. So people have pushed gummies on me because they're like, oh, it's nothing like that. This is... and it's
pushed gummies on her. Think about this, right? Because she's like older than me. She's in her 60s, 70, whatever it is, 60-something, right? And, at some point, you think you might want to grow out of this stuff.
As a matter of fact, my assistant, Craig, gave me a gummy because he had a hard time sleeping, and he said...
Somebody go investigate Craig. She's ratting out all of her drug buddies. Just
try this gummy. And I said, I don't want it. He goes, no, it's nothing like that. And everyone always says that. And I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to die. I was...
So obviously gremlins are allergic to marijuana.
So freaked out. And then since then, people are like, oh, you haven't tried the right gummy. You need to try it. Everyone has a thing that if you try this, it's different than the other.
All gummies are created equal.
And so, no, I don't like any of that.
Can you tell when people are high? Well, obviously you couldn't with me. If I was high, you'd know it. There would be no...
Look at this vast gap between them. That's more than 6 feet of social distancing.
No question about it.
No, I've seen you high.
Oh, you have? Interesting. Yeah.
Woo! She's seen Jimmy Kimmel's high. Woo! Woo!
We're not seeing it right now, but why don't we play a round of Who's High?
Yes, I'd like to see if I would be able to do that.
Okay, I'm going to leave this to you then. We have...
Oh, so then it goes on. She tells some story. I'm not going to, this is enough of this. I mean, they're playing a game called Who's High, right? Where all these guys are masked up. And, there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger point to all this. And so I did my share of alcohol and drugs when I was a young person. The first time I got drunk, I was 14. And me and my friends had built this half pipe out of old wood that was from a abandoned tobacco barn out in the woods. And we went over some senior. I was a freshman in high school, and one of these guys that was a part of building this half pipe for skateboarding, and I sucked. It was when skateboarding was just becoming a thing. And we went over to this one dude's house, and his parents were gone, and he had a keg, and I played a little beer pong. Like I was 5 feet, 100 pounds, right? I was like small as a freshman in high school, and I drank a ton of alcohol. And my mom used to have these prayer meetings at her house. And I staggered up the stairs, and there was like 4 nuns and, 10 of these people, 10, 15 people at this prayer meeting. And I was clearly drunk because I could barely like climb. We lived in like a split level raised ranch, and the front door had stairs going down to the basement and then stairs going to the upper floor. And like I could barely get up the stairs, and the living room was right there, and they must have been able to smell the alcohol on me. And I went into my room. I just started throwing up like beer, like, and I was like, "I love you, Mom." And so, and shortly after that, well, I should also say that, like I fell out of off a zip line. We built a zip line, me and my buddy, on this. We built a platform. There's woods behind my house, and there was this guy who used to own all the land there, the grandfather of my friend, and they lived behind us. And there was these cool trails, and we got dirt bikes and things like this, and there were these cool trails, and they owned this big patch of woods. And me and this kid built a platform. We were going to build like some sort of like a tree house out there, but we just built a platform. And he said he had found this wheel with 2 handles on it that was used for a zip line. And he got all this wire he got from his grandfather's workshop or whatever. His grandfather was like an old farmer, and I was like, all I remember about him was like he was 90 years old, and he staggered around the farm, and every time he saw his grandson, he asked him to pull his finger, and he would fart, right? And so we got this wire, and we weren't heavy enough to pull the wire tight. So the wire had a bow in it. And, we both went on the zip line once, and then he went a second time, and then I went a second time. Then I went a second time. And the first time I stopped over a creek, and I was about, my feet were about 8 to 10 feet off the ground because of the bow and the wire. And so when I dropped down, my foot hit a rock, and I sort of twisted my ankle. So I was going to jump off and push off harder with just a pulley with no safety thing on it. It was about 30 feet. We were about 30 feet up in the air. And I jumped, and the next thing I know, I woke up in the hospital. I was unconscious for like 12 hours, kind of a near-death experience. No memory of the fall, right? And so after that is when I started drinking, and then one of my skateboarding buddies invited me for a sleepover with some other dude, and he was a local like drug dealer that got all the kids in the neighborhood to buy pot, and he would go out and get it from like real drug dealers, and then he would pinch the bag, right? He would steal about half of it from, that's how he was able to keep himself in pot, by getting everyone in the neighborhood to, smoke it. And so their goal was to get me to, get stoned. And I was, against drugs, all these things. But I saw them smoking, and I'm like, what's the harm, right? I'll give it a try. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't get stoned. And, I tried it a couple more times. And then one of my buddies, a different, friend, had gotten hash from somebody. And I smoked that, and I laughed so hard. Like it was the first time I ever, felt anything from smoking pot. And I really enjoyed that particular experience. And so for a number of years, maybe, 5 or 6 years, I smoked pot on and off, and I, drank alcohol, and I did a little coke. And, one of my buddies ended up being like a coke dealer in college. And, we freebase coke by pouring ammonia over it to cut it, get rid of the cut, and then smoke it, which was like just stupid stuff, right? But when I was about 24, 25, I realized that I didn't like alcohol. Like almost every time I drank alcohol, I didn't feel good. It just sucked my energy, and I was like, not really into it. Now, no one in my family was much of a drinker, right? My parents had some, my dad have a beer, some old Milwaukee, something like that, And then, I realized that whenever I had smoked pot after the initial, I don't know, first couple times I tried it, I would get like sleepy or get like a headache, or, I would get the condition they called feeling burnt out. And so I realized that I didn't enjoy any of this stuff. Like, it wasn't making me feel good. It almost always made me feel worse. And it was, something that there was, sometimes it'd be days of a hangover or whatever. And so I just stopped all of it. I was like, this stuff, doesn't make me feel good, and it actually makes me feel bad, and it's, expensive and, again, illegal and all these other things. And I found that over the years, even in terms of aspirin or Tylenol, and then when I started meditating, like, I can go to a bar and I feel like just, I don't know, it's the condition of other people drinking or it's the smell of the alcohol, but it makes me like a little bit woozy, slightly, but it makes me like a sense of vertigo. I don't like being in places that drink alcohol or around people who drink alcohol, just because there's a sensitivity from the heartfulness meditation. But anyways, we see this in American TV shows and in movies. Watch how many times there'll be alcohol involved. Like old ass people drinking at lunches, and, every time they go to sit down and talk to somebody, you want a drink, right? Alcohol is so present in the American culture, so much so, like when you're watching TV shows and movies, watch how many times during an episode or a movie that alcohol is mentioned. Like, it's so much. It's so prevalent in our movies and in our culture. And it's not only not good for you, but for most part, it's, it's a depressant, and it doesn't have a positive effect. And now with pot, which has become legal, medicinal, and or decriminalized, and it's become a medicine. In fact, my daughter Anna that just passed away, I guess she got into therapy, which I'm not understanding. The therapist prescribed her marijuana. And so, in which I guess it, my son was talking to her about this, and she said that it made her feel bad, right? And so, like, this is where we are, where pot is considered a medicine, right? And lots of people, I know that some of you will, you're pot smokers, and you're going to, tell me the virtues of smoking pot. But I can say that the spiritual energy in the heartfulness system and the spiritual experiences and the feeling of divine love that is there in the transmission. And again, it varies. It doesn't always feel the same way. And of course, there's a cleaning aspect. Like, there's this big gathering coming up, and usually someone will go through a cleaning before the gathering, a practitioner of the system. They might get sick. They might have, emotional stuff come up, whatever. Maybe something unpleasant, often something unpleasant. But the way you feel after the gathering, at least for me and many other people, is, you feel amazing, right? You feel great and just recharged and rejuvenated on a spiritual level. And I've had some incredible spiritual experiences. And, in the heartfulness system, the hangover comes first. The cleaning comes first. It's to clean out whatever grossness and some scars that are there. And so that the transmission, you can absorb more of the transmission at the gathering. So stuff gets cleaned out, and you go through a process called boga, or experience of these samskaras, and they get burned off, past impressions and things, and, maybe it's addictions or anger or hatred or some negative qualities in your system. They're pulled to the surface and cleaned out, and then this divine energy is there to take its place, right? Something is removed, and then more of this transmission can be put into somebody's spiritual system, a practitioner's spiritual system. And it's much more subtle, and it has a long-lasting positive effect on people over a cumulative amount of time. It builds over, years and years of this practice. And as you get older, you start having health issues. I'm 56, I believe. And I've not had any major surgery. The COVID's one of the worst things in terms of, probably the worst illness I've ever had. And, like I had that concussion when I was a kid, and, that was, I was out for 12 hours and woke up in the hospital, so that was pretty severe. But I haven't had any major operations and nothing like cancer, nothing big like that, but I definitely feel older. My body doesn't work like it used to. I'm often stiff. I don't have the endurance and the physical capacity I had before. And so, there's things to do with getting old. And I can't imagine adding alcohol or drugs to that because your liver gets, used up. Your liver gets toxic. And I did some liver cleanses. I mean, I went through this period where I did, there's this process where you can expunge these gallbladder stones. I don't know if some of you might have heard of this or have done this. I'm not recommending it. Like, I don't recommend anything. It's something for you to decide. But I did this years ago. I did a lot of, we built a sweat lodge, and I fasted for, a number of days, and, did these cleanses. They have these, stones that are in your liver. They're like little, they're like, I don't know if they're called calcium or they're little balls of fat and things that live in your liver and your gallbladder. And you can open up your ducts through this process. I'm not going to, talk about it here. And then drink some olive oil, and it causes your liver to go into spasm, and you can expunge these stones. And I did like 9 of them in a row. Like every 2 weeks I do another one to clean out my liver and things like this. There was anyways, but just to say that your liver and your system as you get older doesn't handle toxins like it used to. Like when you're young, you can eat crappy fast foods, and you can be around like pollution, and you can, do alcohol and drugs, and your, liver really works, and your system of getting rid of toxins really works. And so you're able to expunge these things. And maybe you feel hungover for a couple of days, but as you get older, you eat a bad meal, and it could, mess you up for a couple of days, a whole week or something, right? I mean, as you get older, your body just doesn't deal with these things. And you have these people pushing alcohol and drugs like as something that people are supposed to do their whole life, and then people are on all kinds of these medications. And, every time I take some sort of pharmaceutical medication, I have some sort of reaction to it, right? I mean, there's, I took this drug for migraines, it was like Imitrex or something, and it worked incredibly. Like the first time I took it, it mimicked serotonin. And not only did it get rid of the migraine, but it made me feel amazing. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. This is back years and years ago. But then the next time I took it, like it acted as a diuretic, and I was just like peeing constantly, and it didn't get rid of the migraine, and it made me like nauseous, and I felt horrible. After I took it, a couple times, my body said, nah, and it, changed how it interpreted or dealt with this input into my body, right? And you have that. People take psychological medications. I've heard that with Cymbalta, and people feel amazing. They're going through some psychological issue, and they take some sort of psychological medication, and at first it makes them feel amazing. But then they feel worse, like they feel really bad and even get like suicidal. And then they have to wean themselves off, and they're like addicted, and they go through this withdrawal, and it like, kicks their ass. They feel horrible. This happens to so many people. I saw this with kids in the treatment center where the medication works at first, but then it stops working, and getting off, it's a nightmare. And usually the psychiatrist prescribes you something else, and you go through like 8 or 10 medications, and you never feel good. And then you're all like messed up afterwards. You never get back to where you were in the beginning. And in the beginning, you had felt like crap, right? You were taking this stuff because you were depressed, and the medications like mess you up, and you also have physical side effects from them. And my brother, when he was in Vietnam, he said that they always had, like, there was some guy or, a couple guys there, and they were basically allowed to push drugs. And of course, alcohol was really cheap or even free at times. And so they were always getting messed up. Like they were always drinking and, using, whatever kind of drugs. And they were like easily and readily available. And the military didn't do anything to stop it because, he thought about it and he said, people who are hungover or on drugs or whatever it is are a lot easier to control and boss around, right? Especially if they're addicted to something. And you see this with addicts. They'll, accomplish incredible feats to buy drugs and continuously do their drugs or whatever it is. People who are addicts are easily controlled by their drug dealers. They're slaves to their addiction, and if you control their addiction, you control them. And you see this in our society. That's why drugs are so readily available. And now they're illegal, prescription level drugs, opiates and things, psychological medications that all are, they mess people up. They make you less than, and they block your connection to God. Like I went through this. I had an operation a couple years ago, and I was on, whatever it was, oxycodone or Oxycontin or whatever it was. And it made me feel horrible. It took me about a week to get it out of my system. And I only was on it for like 5 or 6 days. Miserable. Like, it just made me feel miserable. It, affected my meditations and being able to connect to the source, at least consciously. And I realized that, people who are on drugs, it's a big problem. I mean, that's one of the things about the heartfulness system, that you're not supposed to be using alcohol or drugs when you do it, because it just basically blocks your ability to connect to God. And, it just, there's a samskara there, and that has to be cleaned out, the addiction, before like this transmission can be really given. I've told stories about this in the past. There was this kid that came to me when I was a preceptor. This is when I was just made a preceptor. I came back from India, and a number of people had started when I was there, but they moved away or some of them quit. This was back in the day where heartfulness wasn't even known about on the internet, and there really wasn't much of an internet. So this is in like 1997 or 1996 or something. And this, I used to put up flyers and, about the meditative system. It wasn't even called heartfulness back then. And some people would call me every once in a while. And this kid called me, and he was interested in spirituality. And I was, I gave him the initial 3 introductory sittings, and he came for group meditation. It was just the 2 of us. And I had been giving the group meditation with nobody there, because you're supposed to sit as a trainer and transmit and, give these sittings, give these group meditations. You transmit to a group and you clean their hearts, and then more transmission is given, right, at these group meditations. And if there's nobody there, that, you don't have anybody in your, what's called the center, you're supposed to sit and do these sittings every Sunday anyway, because it creates a vacuum and it creates energy in the community, and eventually people will come. And so when I gave the sittings when he wasn't there, the energy flowed through me, the transmission, but when he was there, there was no transmission. And I realized he had been using drugs. Like, I just knew it. Like, he was using drugs, turned out to be heroin, And so, I asked him about it. And, I asked various trainers, because I was new to it. I was about 30 at the time, I believe. And I asked other people who were trainers. It's a volunteer, position. And there wasn't really any sort of policy, even though I knew that the transmission wasn't flowing, right? That he wasn't receiving transmission because he was on drugs, and the transmission couldn't be given to him while he was doing the drugs, so he wouldn't, feel it. And so, I asked various people, and like they all had specific answers, and I looked at the people that were in their centers. There was one guy, he was, around Master Chargy a lot, and he was like an ex-Vietnam vet, and he was really sort of loud, and he's kind of had a big personality, kind of funny, but a little bit crazy. And he had a bunch of young, college kids that had come to him. His center was mostly young hippies, like from, college grade hippies. And, I just looked at these kids, and I could see they're all smoking pot. So his thing was just, keep on doing it, right? Keep on giving the guy sittings, even though the transmission wasn't coming out, right? It wasn't flowing. And then I talked to various other people, but finally I made the decision on my own that if the transmission wasn't coming, then there was no reason to do it, right? He wasn't receiving transmission. And so I told him, when you stopped using heroin, you can come back, right? You're not supposed to use it, right? And it's not, the transmission isn't coming either way, so you're not receiving the sittings. And he said, I am a spiritual seeker. Like the guy said that, but he couldn't get, out of his heroin addiction to move up to the next level. But what I've seen personally, like I said, I just outgrew all these types of things. And I know that they were wearing me down. Like they had a negative effect on me. Drugs and alcohol. And, they do on everybody. It's like, giving yourself a substance that's going to decrease your ability to perform. Right? You're not going to perform as well smoking pot or drinking alcohol. You just won't. Like, you're not going to be as good as a person in whatever your job is. I mean, it impairs your driving. You could even end up in jail for, driving under the influence of alcohol. And, all of these drugs and alcohol have a negative effect on various levels of your ability to think and reason and even, resist the the oppression that you're under, because you can't fight back against the man when the man holds the keys to your drug addiction, slave chains. And you can say the same thing about foods, processed foods and fast foods. And, these were things I ate when I was younger. And, if I eat them now, I definitely feel it almost immediately. It's hard to digest. And, I mean, these, foods that are of like low vibration and low quality, filled with GMO or toxins or chemicals and whatever, right? I was in the grocery store today, and you no longer have to wear a mask. There's no mask mandate where I live, but everyone's still wearing the masks, most of them. And, no one ever hassles me. But, once in a while people look at you like, oh, you're not wearing a mask, and, whatever it is. And, I was thinking about it, if somebody were to say something to me, I could easily look in their grocery cart and pick out a number of things that they're eating that are causing problems for the rest of us, right? People who eat really bad foods, fast foods and processed foods, are a drain on the healthcare system. It causes, heart disease and cancer and, these things. And people who are, again, on Medicaid or Medicare, which lots of people are, and, they're draining the taxpayer dollars to support their bad and, unhealthy behaviors. And no one's saying anything about those things, right? I mean, in terms of COVID, yes, everyone's freaked out about COVID, but the two major killers are heart disease and cancer, and we know what causes those things. I mean, people are eating carcinogens and eating foods that are bad for their heart on a daily basis. They got a grocery cart filled of processed food, chicken McNuggets and, Twinkies and, toxic snacks and sodas that are loaded with sugar that takes down their immune system. But they got some mask, that's been sitting on their floor of their car getting dirty and having, bacteria in it. They slap it on, they go in and buy all this crappy food thinking that they're safe somehow. And it's just, this is when you're talking about NPCs, non-playable characters, these characters that you can't use in the game. There's no way that they're not an avatar. They're not something that you can control, and they don't really have any purpose other than, one line or one activity or action. They're like extras in a movie, expendables, right? And this is, a big part of it. People are addicted to video games and the internet, which has an effect on their brain patterns, and people are addicted to TV, which affects them and puts them into a daze and programs them. And, most people are operating at a very low consciousness, low vibrational level, and they're eating horrible foods that are weighing them down and, making them obese and making them, less than. And then they're using drugs and alcohol. Either they're self-medicating or they're on medications that are having side effects and psychological medications. And with all this, cocktail of stuff, all these things are, it's like when you put ankle weights on and you can't run as fast because you have these ankle weights. It's like that, but all over their internal system. They have all these things inside of them. It's making their internal organs work less, well. It's making your brain be cloudy and under functioning and, all of these things. It's just weighing people down. And, now it's very prevalent to talk about drug use, which is, people are like, oh, it's freedom and, everyone's using them anyway. Yeah, but it's not a good thing, right? Like at some point you got to outgrow it. And you realize that, whatever it is, unhealthy foods and, any sort of addiction, gambling addiction, even addiction to the internet, you got to realize the things that are, weighing you down and making you feel like crap. And, those things are crutches. People are like, well, if I didn't have those things, if I wasn't able to toss back a couple of beers after work, I couldn't get through my day. I just look forward to it or whatever it is, right? Partying on the weekends and, people just have something that, numbs them to the pain of their miserable lives. But until you find a way to become healthy and organic and fully functioning, then I mean, what good are you going to be? Like you're just, I mean, you're only operating at 70% or 60% or whatever it is, under 50% in many cases. People are dumbed down and just lost, and I mean, they just don't, you never get ahead of the game, right? I mean, people's jobs weigh them down, their relationships weigh them down, they're married to people they hate, and they, they go to a job that they hate, and they're using all these drugs and alcohol. I'm sure there's people here that are like, yeah, I mean, that's what you're going through, and you gotta, I mean, it's like you gotta find a way to pull yourself out, and you don't have the internal strength and fortitude to feel like you're bankrupt and you're operating at a deficit. And the heartfulness system fills people's love bank, because people's love bank gets drained by life. You get hurt, you get dumped, you get cheated on, you get, whatever it is, you get, abused in some way, and you get exploited, and you're just eating the wrong foods, drinking, doing these things that I've been saying, and your love energy, your prana just gets worn down. It's like all this reserves that you had as a kid. You had all this energy and strength in your system, and now you're just, depleted. You can barely, pull yourself out of bed every morning. You don't even sleep that well. The heartfulness system's transmission fills people's love bank. Divine energy, God's energy is love, right? And so that's the energy that's given in the heartfulness system. And the cleaning process helps people break away from all these types of behaviors. There's a wonderful story where this, kid showed up at Babaji's house, and he was, crying and lamenting, saying, I have this problem, I'm drinking all the time. And Babaji said, oh, go ahead and drink. The guy said, really? You're going to let me drink? And Babaji said, yeah, under one condition. Every time you go to take a drink, you have the thought that it's me sitting there and not you drinking the alcohol. So you can drink as much as you want, but each time you take a drink, think I'm drinking and not you. And the kid said, oh, great, that'll be easy. And so he sat down and he thought to himself, Babaji's here and he's drinking the alcohol. Babaji's the second master of the heartfulness system. And he said, he took a drink, and then he, started to throw up violently. Like he was just sick, and like he couldn't stand the smell or taste of alcohol after that. And he came back to Babaji and said, yeah, I took a drink, but like it made me sick, and now I can't drink anymore. Babaji said, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, And so, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.